take on the darkness, stare down deceit. Murder in the headlines, justice in the beat. From cold case whispers to killers in disguise, we rip off the mask, expose all the lies. Facts like bullets reload and deliver. Truth cuts deep like a blade in a river. Corruption shakes when the mic goes live. We dig where others won't survive. Games rolling through the smoke. Truth hits hard, no time for a joke. Deceit, murder, we name every name. No restraint, no shame, just flame. Locked on the case, we investigate.
This is 12-Gauge Investigative. Let's jump in.
You'll ever need 12-Gauge Investigate. We make them bleed. No games, no censors, just truth. Justice is loud, and we're the sound. This is 12-Gauge Investigative.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Saturday to you all. My name is 12-Gauge. Welcome to my channel, 12-Gauge Investigative. You know, we had a very awesome live last night with my special guest, Sonia D. And it was pretty enlightening, and there was a lot of information that was given. We were able to deep dive into a lot of areas and discuss certain things that many have been speaking about. And I hope that you feel that you get some answers when you come into this channel, and that it's unbiased and pretty much to the point of what you're looking for. You know, excuse me, this morning I wanted to talk about a Vinnie Politan episode that I saw, and I'm going to give the shout out to Vinnie from Court TV. And I want to go ahead and discuss what the episode was talking about. Yes, I did see that. Somebody sent me something in a text where they talked about that, and and I also saw it on Viviana's. Maybe I'll show that first. I don't think she did a video. I think she just did a timestamp, not a timestamp, a community post about it. I mean, all these years we've not known who the DoorDash driver is, and then all of a sudden somebody wants to out her, which, I mean, that's their right? So I think something that Nina sent me had her saying something to the effect of, let me read it, that way I don't misinterpret what she said. I think she sent it to my email. Are you guys up and drinking your coffee this morning? I'm not drinking coffee. I'm drinking my Celsius watermelon. It says around the 33-minute mark, she says, I'm the DoorDash driver. I have to testify. I saw Brian. I parked beside him. So she sent me the video. Okay, and I'm gonna play a little bit of that part. I don't want to really play other people's stuff, but I'll play that really quickly where she's talking about that. Because if this is true and this is legit, then maybe she did see the door. Maybe she did see Brian or Brain, as people call him. Hold on a second, y'all. I'm get- I'm gonna play just a little bit of this person. Her name is Translucent, and she does have the police body cam video. So I'm gonna play this and see if this is the part where Nina was talking about. Here we go.
I told them that I took a pain pill quite a while ago for my back.
Okay.
I've been on them for years and years. So my parents, no problem.
Well, one of the officers also expressed that they believed you're under the influence of stimulants. Did you take a stimulant today?
I took my colonizing WrestleMania and immune system deficiency. I get sick and because
So, do you think officers arrested you because of your medical conditions, or did you actually use drugs?
I told them that I took a pain pill quite a while ago for my back.
Okay.
I've been on them for years and years. So my parents, no problem.
Well, one of the officers also expressed that they believed you're under the influence of stimulants. You are going to go home, and our goal is medical conditions, or did you actually use drugs?
I told them that I took a pain pill quite a while ago for my back.
Okay.
I've been on them for years and years. So my parents, no problem.
Well, one of the officers also expressed that they believed you're under the influence of stimulants. Did you take a stimulant today?
I took my colonizing WrestleMania and immune system deficiency. I get sick and because it gets bad really quick.
So,
Well, I don't understand what portion Nina was talking about because she said around the 33-minute mark, and I'm around there, but I don't hear anything about what she's claiming. Hold on, let it play a little bit more.
When I was in 2003, I was all of a sudden sick, and then within 24 hours, I was put in a drug-induced coma. My right lung was completely filled with fluid. My left lung was completely filled with fluid. We took turnover got over 99 until I was halfway to Spokane already.
okay.
I have to watch my health be careful.
You have to watch your what?
I have to watch my health be careful.
Okay. What medical conditions do you have?
Arthritis, I have fibromyalgia, I have
You have so you have arthritis.
rheumatoid arthritis.
Okay.
My joints are always dislocating. I also, my upper shoulders, my arms, I forget what it's called, but basically I'm getting blood flow and then my legs, my arms.
Okay.
I don't see it. I don't hear it. She said 33-minute mark, and I'm already way past that. I'm at 35, so I don't see what she's talking about. Okay, that's a waste of time. I'm not gonna mess with that. Maybe if y'all can find the exact timestamp, then I can play it. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time. Let me get on with what I want to present. This is Vinnie Politan, and he's discussing a lot more of the Brian Koberger case, and I thought it was pretty interesting. I wanted to play it and discuss some more of it myself, because of course you can't get enough, right? Here we go.
There were no screams reported, no cries for help heard, just the grim discovery that would haunt a community and captivate the nation. They were vibrant, full of life, with futures unfolding before them. Then in the darkness, someone crept through their sanctuary with cold precision and devastating violence. The attack was swift, methodical, almost unreal. The weapon, a fixed blade knife. The motive, still a mystery. As investigators scrambled, the case drew speculation, suspicion, and fear. A white car, a cell signal, DNA on a knife sheath left behind. The picture grew clearer, but the wound left on Moscow, Idaho remains deep, and justice still uncertain. This is going to be a huge, huge trial, but it's going to be a trial where every piece of evidence will be challenged. Prosecutors have the burden in this case, like they do in every case, to prove it beyond any and all reasonable doubt. Now, since the crime happened, we've learned some information, but there's a whole lot that we don't know. But bits.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming in here and spending your morning with 12 Gauge Investigative and the chat. Welcome so much for being here. The video I was playing in the beginning, I got from one of my subs, and she was telling me that, around the 33-minute mark that they would be discussing some certain stuff, and I didn't hear it. So maybe if they got a better understanding of that, then I can play it later on. But I don't want to dox this woman. I don't want to play the whole video because I don't want her name to be out there, even though it already is by some other people's obviously getting the video and playing it all the way through. She's been through enough, and I don't believe that she needs to be, she had a lot of health issues, as she was saying just then. I don't want to add to those health issues, if she's going to testify apparently before a jury, I don't want to, put her life in danger or anything like that. But this is Vinnie Politan. I know y'all know who he is, and I hope that you enjoyed the video. I'm going to be giving commentary to it, and also we're going to be talking about the fairness of a trial based on reasonable doubt, because that's what the trial is eventually going to be based on, right? Or of guilt, the prosecution's burden of proof to prove that this individual did it.
Bits and pieces are being released through court documents. And during the course of this program, you're going to hear some of that new information. I want to begin, though, with something that we have heard before, but tonight we're going to have new context associated with it. So let's take a listen to the 911 call that was made the morning after these brutal murders.
911 location of your emergency.
Something is happening. Something's happening in our house. We don't know what.
What is the address of the emergency?
1122.
What is the rest address?
Oh, Kings Road.
And tell me exactly what's going on.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night, and she's not waking up.
Okay.
Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night. Can I just tell you what happened pretty much?
What is going on currently? Is someone passed out right now?
I don't really know, but pretty much at 4 a.m.
Okay, I need to know what's going on right now if someone is passed out. Can you find that out?
Okay. So we've heard this 911 call multiple times. We've heard it in different variations. We've heard it cleaned up. We've heard it slowed down. We've heard it all kinds of different variations. And I know everybody has some kind of theory behind this 911 call. I hope that you know that by listening to Dylan and everybody talking right there, that there's a lot of avenues that are ultimately going on in this 911 call. To say that they're calm and they're rehearsed, to say the least, is very, very. It doesn't sound to me like that's a calm person right there. It doesn't sound to me like that is an individual who has this situation rehearsed. What do you think, chat? Do you believe that this 911 call and everything that you've heard dictate the emergency situation at that point in time? Let me know what you think as I continue to play this.
Yeah, I'll come. Come on, but we gotta go check. But we have to. What's wrong? She's not waking up.
Okay, and how old is she?
She's 20.
20, you said?
Yes, 20. Here's one.
Okay.
Hello? Hello?
Okay, I need someone to stop passing the phone around because I've talked to 4 different people.
Okay, sorry, they just gave me the phone.
Is she breathing?
Hello?
Is she breathing?
No.
Again, difficult to listen to knowing what we know about what happened inside that house. But we've got to learn more about what was happening in that house because it's going to be part of the case, part of the trial, part of the evidence. And that brings us to the first question in our investigation. What was happening inside the house just before the 911 call? Right? Because the 911 call is somewhat chaotic. The phone is being passed around. There's a lot of confusion. So what was happening? And what we learned last night, very briefly, is that Dylan and Bethany summoned Hunter, Emily, and another female over to come check out the house with them because they were scared. So once these individuals arrived at the home, they were met outside by Dylan and Bethany. And then apparently at this position, Hunter went upstairs, grabbed a knife, and then proceeded to walk through the house. And Dylan very briefly encountered a sighting of Xana once again. She not only saw her on her way down to Bethany's room, she saw her at that point, and she had stated in the document that she was unsure exactly what she was witnessing because she didn't understand at that point what was going on. But I'll let this play a little bit. Happening inside that house just before the 911 call was happening. Here with us to help go through this new information, former homicide investigator, host of the Interview Room with Chris McDonough. It is Chris McDonough, and psychotherapist, author of Till Death Do Us Part, Love, Marriage, and the Mind of the Killer's Spouse, and host of the Talking Live and Bite Size podcast, Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Thank you both for being here. I want to put this up because we've got some new information, and I want to go through this information and then get your perspectives on it and a little more analysis and meaning from it. So here we go. At approximately 11:50 a.m., DM, who is Dylan, called her friend and asked her to come over and check the house because she was scared. This is, remember, 11:50 a.m. So EA and her boyfriend, HJ, came over. Now, they met DM and BF, Dylan and Bethany, the two surviving roommates, at the bottom floor of the house. Okay, you know the house has 3 levels. The bottom floor is where Bethany's bedroom is.
Yes, that is a that is a great comment right there, as well as all of them that I'll put up here on the panel. Shock is real. Shock is real. And kind of like Rondi says, shock can last a while too. So, shock being real, you just don't know how somebody is going to respond whenever something like that does happen. If you have that moment where, obviously, in the 911 call, they were stating, we don't know what's happening, we don't know what's going on. We don't have any understanding of this. This timestamp you want to look at is 3612. Is that 36 minutes or 36 seconds? Yeah, but my concern is what happened 8 hours before the call. What the fuck? Who wait that long? All BS. I'm sorry. This is not normal. Well, we've discussed that as well. Nobody has stated that's excusable in one sense of the word. We're just trying to find out exactly what was going on. You know what I mean? Elizabeth, we're not saying that was excusable in one sense of the word. 3612 on her YouTube time clock. 36 minutes and 12 seconds. Okay. Well, let me get this through and I'll play that at the end. Okay? Because I've already started this. I don't want to be jumping around all over the place. But the fact that they did call 911, we may never know the reason for that. And I mean, we do have strong opinions about that. There's a lot of people that do. And that's justified. I mean, they want to know exactly why 911 was not called. In hindsight, 911 could have been called. As many people have stated, a trauma physician could have been at the residence right next to the people that were cut, sliced, stabbed. They still wouldn't have been saved. You know, the sad part about this is, 911 could have been called, should have been called, but we weren't in that position to make that decision for these girls. And whether they made the right decision or wrong decision or the reason or rationale behind it, we may never know. And that's okay to have your opinion. It really is, you know?
And that's where Dylan and Bethany were. Together, Dylan, Bethany, and HJ started to walk up the stairs from that bottom first floor up to the second floor. When they reached the second floor, HJ went to the kitchen to grab a kitchen knife. When he came back out, Dylan saw Xana again for a split second. And this is a quote that they're quoting from a statement. And I just started bawling because I thought she had just I don't even know. I thought maybe she was still just drunk and all asleep on the floor. Bethany also.
See, it says, I don't even know. I thought maybe she was still just drunk and still asleep on the floor. I mean, to put somebody's context or their words and to say that we know the meaning or the correlation between that's assuming a lot. That's assuming that we know exactly the mindset of this individual. I don't know this mindset. I don't know if y'all believe that you know the mindset. But obviously her statement is her statement. And she stated, I don't even know. I thought maybe she was still just drunk and all asleep on the floor. BF also saw Xana lying on the floor. HJ told DM and BF to get out. So to see these people in this context and to listen to their words. It is their words. I can't put words in their mouth. I can't put a simulation that I know what they were thinking, what they were believing, and why they acted the way they did. I can't do that. That's not fair to them. Just like you don't like people to put words in your mouth, it's not fair to put words in their mouth either. You know what I mean? Thank you, Leslie, for that super chat. If she was standing near the top of the stairs, then I don't think she could have seen the blood. And that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, even if you don't see the blood, you see somebody passed out on the floor. Thank you for that, Jeff. Is there any way you can crop that out and just send that as a soundbite so we don't dox this person? If you could do that and send it to my email, that'd be great. It's interesting that there's been so much put on the shoulders of these young females. Why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that? Well, at 19, as I've always spoken and I'll continue to speak it, maybe they didn't have a clue about life. They didn't have a clue. And that doesn't excuse it, but it excuses their current situation because if you don't know what you're doing, I mean, they ran out, they still didn't have an understanding of what was going on. Something has happened in our home and we don't know what. How can you take that statement and make it mean something more than what they stated? Of course, you can have your thoughts and your beliefs on that statement, but that doesn't mean that your thoughts are correct. You said, my God, sitting and chatting with horror upstairs and not doing, I would have left the house and called for help, just leave Zen on the floor, not nothing. Please, all corruption. Well, that's your belief. That's your belief, and I'm not here to change it. I'm really not. I mean, you can believe and think what you want until we know otherwise that is exactly what that is, just your belief system. And it's hard to change somebody's perception of something when they're unable to see more to collaborate to a common ground. And, I'm not going to try to change your perception because that's your belief system. And it's hard because, like you said, sitting and chatting with a horror upstairs. But do you really believe that they knew that they were murdered? Or do you believe, because all the wording says our roommate is passed out and not waking up. If they believed that she was murdered or that she was potentially mortally wounded, don't you believe they would have used different wording? That's just my question to you and anybody else.
Saw Xana lying on the floor. At that moment, HJ told Dylan and Bethany to get out. EA, who's his girlfriend, who had started up the stairs, also turned around after HJ instructed her not to come any further. They both went outside. Shortly afterwards, so HJ is now in the house by himself, exited the house and told them to call 911. HJ was pale white and mentioned something about someone being unconscious. And another thing that we need to take into account is as we're listening to this video and as he's reading it and as the 911 call was being played, it's being played in a significant factor that they're still not going through the motion. We're not seeing them actually going in the house, out the house, in the house, crying, all that stuff. We don't see all that. We're just hearing it. So if we were to see the crime scene as that was happening, then maybe our mind would be a little more different when it comes to this situation. But once again, people are able to believe what they believe, and that's a beautiful thing because as long as we don't get hostile and violent about it, because what's that really going to change at this point? What that really going to change at this point?
Is it going to bring the 4 back? No, it's not. Getting upset and angry and having, let me take these off, having animosity towards things is not going to bring them back. You know what I mean? Because they were living through it. We didn't live through this situation. You know, they were living through this. We didn't live through this. So to be sitting here and watching the situation unfold in front of our eyes, it's easy to say, yeah, I would have done this. I would have ran out of the house. I would have been scared. I would have been afraid. I would have been this. I would have been that. But obviously, they weren't at that position, or otherwise, things would have happened different. And it's sad that they weren't more aware. But there's a lot, working with juveniles, I didn't believe this until I started working with them. They're very clueless of what to do right in a time of emergency. Most of them will just freeze. They really will. They'll freeze up. They won't know what to do. They'll be looking at you with wide eyes until you say, run or get down. And it's the truth. They won't know what to do. They'll freeze up because they don't have that capacity. Okay, I've never been in a position like this. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what to do. And they'll just freeze.
Let me start with you, Chris McDonough. The picture I'm getting here, Dylan had called her friend because she was scared. I think she knew something really bad had happened in that house, but she didn't want to acknowledge it. And now for the first time, it seems like someone is finding Xana, who is dead.
Yeah, Vinny,
Before Chris talks, I want to say this. Okay, let's say that Dylan did know that Xana was dead. Let's say that. Let's say she did know. But like he just said, she didn't want to acknowledge it. Denial is an awful thing to be in whenever you're trying to make a decision, because your mind is playing tricks on you. It's saying, well, this is not real. If she was dead, you would know it, and you don't feel like she's dead. Just somebody laying on the floor. Unless you walk up to them and take their pulse, or actually see them not moving, you're sitting there watching them for hours, not moving. Then I get where you can say, well, they knew that they were potentially dead or other things. I get that. But to just walk by or to come back upstairs and glance in there and she hasn't moved, to be fair, she could have been passed out. And when you're passed out, it's almost like you're sleeping. So if she's looking from the stairwell, top step area into the room, she's not going to be able to hear breathing. She's not going to see her chest rising and falling. She's going to have to assume that she's seeing what she's seeing. You know? I think they had heard, they just thought it was the girls playing with Murphy, and Xana and Ethan may be interacting. They would never think it was murder. Well, what would be the reason they would believe that they've been murdered? Can you give me that answer? What would be the reason? Because if you believe that she knew that she was murdered, give me a logical explanation of what had given her that reasoning of belief. Can you do that? Anybody? Because if you have that ability to give me that reasoning and it does make sense without adding your own interjection, then I can understand that. But as to what we have, that's all we have. Let's see what Chris got to say.
I mean, there's a lot going on here, and investigators are trained in what is called critical faculty. What that means essentially is the subconscious mind starts weighing information against, their belief system, their thoughts, their experiences, and it's trying to figure out whether or not there's is this real? Is this fake? And, Dr. Robbie can go into this a lot deeper than I ever could, but what's happening here is these kids are trying to figure out what is going on here. And so are their brains, quite frankly.
So, Dr. Robbie, your thoughts about the mindset and the reactions to all of this? Because Dylan is scared, but she doesn't call 911. It's HJ, who I guess is the one who goes in the room and actually examines Xana to some extent, is the one saying, call 911.
Yeah. So, we know a lot more now about what happened during the crime scene than those girls at the time of the crime. And it sounds like they did not feel safe. They didn't know if the killer or somebody who shouldn't have been there was still in the house. And so they were in a state of panic, and I would even say denial. If something's not within your frame of reference and you've never experienced it before, you don't necessarily assume that someone's been murdered and stabbed. You want to.
And let's go a step further. If she saw one person dressed all in black, right? What to say there wasn't more people in her mind? There wasn't a group of people dressed in black. Let's say that they, in some realm or fashion, thought that somebody had been attacked or even beaten up. And they thought that there was more people in the house. That makes sense why Hunter would grab a knife for protection of not only himself, but for the girls as well. Because if you see one, and in your mindset you're thinking, well, there could be more people in this house. That guy could have left. We don't know where those others, if there is other people in this house. So that does make sense. But it doesn't mean that that's how it happened. If something makes sense, that's one thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean, well, this is how the whole scenario turned out. And that's not what I'm saying right now. I'm not saying that there was more people. I'm saying that in their mindset, they could have felt like there was more people still in the house. That's why Hunter grabbed the knife.
To assume that they were drunk and unconscious. You may be nervous that something extreme happened, but I think these girls were panicked for good reason. They did not feel safe, or I think it was a girl and boy as well. And so the next day they had more time to kind of sit with the reality that wasn't changing for them. And the person who ultimately advised the girls to call 911 was someone who had not experienced that same trauma and fear the night before. So it's just a horrific situation. And on top of that, these girls now are being judged, which is awful. They really should not be.
Well, like I said, Elizabeth, if you have your own insight, share with us. Let us know what you believe actually happened at this portion of what we're talking about, as far as them going up the stairs, grabbing a knife. Hunter tells them to go downstairs, get out, get out. They get the 911 call going. The 911 call operator tells them to get back in there and check if she's unconscious. At what point do you see something different going on, and what do you believe that actually happened different than what we're talking about? I don't believe there was screaming. I've never heard one person say anything about screaming. I've never heard that. But I mean, I guess people hear different things, they hear different things. But like she's saying, they're in a position where they don't have that understanding. And what's wrong with discussing this regarding the surviving roommates? What makes them so evil in people's minds? I don't get that. Because they lived, did they want everybody in the house to be murdered and slaughtered? Would that have been a better scenario? Then who would you have blamed? Who would you have been able to blame at that point? You would have been looking for an alternative suspect, right? That didn't exist. Well, we have two individuals that luckily did not get murdered, that were victims after the fact. But it seems like people are angry because they lived and the other four died. It's like you want everybody in that house to be taken out. And I don't get that. I don't really understand that point.
Should not be. Chris, something else that really struck me here, and now I'm looking at trying to understand the crime. Ethan is also murdered, but no one is seeing him. Like they see Xana, they see her feet, and then her head is pointing away from them, but she's on the ground. I guess he goes closer to examine, yet no one is seeing Ethan at that moment. What are your thoughts about why they're not seeing Ethan, where he could potentially be, and exactly what?
I stopped this video because I don't want to get copyrighted. You have to stop it so many times and comment or at least give some kind of educational feedback. Otherwise, they'll copyright you. And if I get copyrighted again, I'll be down for 2 weeks. And I don't want that to happen. So don't take me stopping the video and commenting as something responding to you. There's a lot more people in chat and I don't want to get copyrighted. Thank you.
Happened in that room where it seems now the door is open and has been opened, has been left open the whole time, regarding Xana's murder and Ethan's murder.
Yeah, Vinny, I think it's really interesting that, when all the girls are together, when about 2:00 in the morning, and then obviously later on this horrific event unfolds, Ethan is just kind of there as kind of the protector. And so he's kind of tucked away in the back there. And it's interesting that the witness says, I see Xana. And she even mentions in some of the text messages, if I remember right, that she even recognizes the color of her clothing. Okay? And so I think Ethan becomes almost an afterthought initially because of the trauma that's taking place here that these kids are witnessing. And it's not uncommon for witnesses, as you know, more than anybody, to kind of get this tunnel vision, and Ethan's kind of left out for a brief moment.
All right, our guests are staying with us. Coming up next, who was killed first? Mad.
And that's interesting to believe that Bethany and Ethan, even though they were a part of this crime, they very seldom get spoken on. Ethan gets spoken on a little bit, but Bethany hardly at all. She doesn't get spoken about at all. And I don't understand that. I don't understand why, unless she really didn't have a lot to offer regarding the interviews or whatever she may have contributed to the police about this whole situation. But we do understand that Ethan was at a point of possibly being defenseless. Um, yeah, if you're asleep, I don't understand how people believe that if you're in a sound sleep, you're going to automatically wake up fighting and being able to defend yourself. I mean, a lot of people are heavy sleepers. And at that point you have to rely on a lot of different things to come out of a stupor, so to speak, especially if you've been drinking. You're not just automatically going to jump up ready to fight. You're not. It's going to take you a little while to gain your bearings enough to defend yourself. And I believe that most of these individuals that are victims were incapable of fighting back. Whether they were drunk, whether they were sober, whether they just ate some food and were sobering up, whatever. If you actually see the 7-inch knife, you're going to understand that knife was very volatile in the commission of these crimes, and it's very hard to fight anyone yielding such a knife with a opportunity of ambushing you and you not knowing what's coming. Even if you see it coming, you can't stop it. You cannot stop a knife from hurting you. Stop thinking about the movies where you stop the hand like that. It's not very feasible, especially a 5'3" female. And no disrespect against females, but you know, he was almost a 6 foot tall guy, 185 pounds. 185 pounds. Okay. If they weren't asleep, how do you know that, Elizabeth? How do you know that they weren't asleep? Can you enlighten me so that I can quit spreading misinformation then? If you believe that, how do you know that for a fact? And I'm talking about factual, not because you heard it somewhere. How do you know that? I would believe that Ethan and Maddie were asleep. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm drinking this Celsius and I'm still trying to wake up. The knife was probably as long as Maddie's poor body. I believe that Maddie and Ethan were asleep. Those are the two that I believe were asleep. The other two, one was eating, the other one was still, I believe that Kaylee was asleep. That's what we've been told. That's what I'm going with. I'm not going with whatever I believe. I'm going with what we were told. And when we find out different, then I'll admit that I was wrong. But at this point, that's all we know. They've said from the very beginning they were asleep, and then we found out differently that at 2 a.m. they weren't asleep. They were all in Kaylee's room, and they dispersed into other rooms, and then all this went down.
Maddie or Kaylee?
These were just girls that went to sleep that night, and a coward, a hunter that went out and he picked his little opponent that was girls.
Is Karen Reed a killer girlfriend?
She's guilty.
Or the scapegoat in an elaborate cover-up?
Karen Reed was brave! We know who did it.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
Just look at that touch from Trinity Rodman. Saturday night. When she is on the field, she changes the game. Saturday night. Saturday night is our night. The new Saturday.
About the murders of these 4 University of Idaho students. Steve Gonzalez is the father of Kaylee, and he has been.
And honestly, whether they were asleep or whether they weren't, the fact of the matter is that I'm trying to focus on is these 4 people were murdered. 2 people lived. What the anger is against those 2 people that lived and the 4 people that were murdered, what makes it so difficult to believe that somebody killed them? Somebody did kill them. No matter what your belief system is, they're no longer here. They're not in witness protection programs. They're not married. They're not going on with their lives. And if you believe that, that's fine. But, there's difference of opinion, and that's fine. It's just interesting to me how people can be so upset at what people say.
Very outspoken from the beginning, and very vocal about this and very public about this, and has really been the face for the victims and for the families talking about this. And he spoke about the death of his daughter and her very best.
Well, I'm going to warn you that if you have any hatred toward this man, to keep your comment to yourself, because you know what? He did lose a daughter. And your hatred towards him or what he's about or what he says, that is your opinion. You have no right to speak on this man unless you personally know him. Okay? So don't be going after this man in the chat, please. That's all I ask.
Friend.
So then they went to high school together. Then they started looking at colleges. They came here together. They eventually get into the same apartment together. And in the end, they died together in the same room, in the same bed.
And it was Maddie and Kaylee who were on that third floor and were killed there. So both of them were there, both were murdered. That's where the most important piece of evidence was also found, which was the knife sheath. But this brings us to the next question in our investigation, and it's about these two victims who were together murdered. Who was killed first? Was it Maddie or was it Kaylee? Can we even tell? Still with us, Chris McDonough and Dr. Robbie Ludwig. What I'd like to do, because I thought this was pretty important.
That's a great comment right there, Cal. You know, if they figured that they were safe in their own home and they weren't. You go to sleep tonight, you assume that you're going to be safe in your home, right? You don't assume that somebody's going to walk in with a knife and kill you and your family. But would people blame the dog for not attacking the man? Would they blame the dog who lived because they didn't attack and save you? No, they wouldn't. And if they did, what sense would that make? It's almost the same thing in this crime. You're blaming two surviving roommates for not saving the four, where the four couldn't even save each other. You know what I mean? The four were saving each other. We're incapable of saving each other. Xana couldn't save Ethan. Ethan couldn't save Xana. Kaylee couldn't save Madison. Madison couldn't save Kaylee. That's what it boiled down to. So you're saying that had these two roommates called 911, that the police could have saved them? It took 2 minutes for them to get there when the final call was made. So obviously he was in and out and he was gone. 2 minutes to get there.
When I saw it and heard it. So Steve Gonzalez on Ashley Banfield's YouTube channel, Drop Dead Serious, spoke about what happened to his daughter and to Maddie and what he learned.
They went for Maddie first, and then Kaylee. Kaylee woke up. Kaylee showed signs of fighting, and or a fight. I don't know really what somebody waking up with somebody stabbing you, how much fighting you can really do. But then this monster struck her multiple times.
So let me tell you, I wish I could demonstrate this on somebody, because then, and I'd record it. I'd say, all right, lay in bed and go to sleep. Wait till they're sound asleep, and then go and jump on them and start punching them in the face as hard as I could, and see exactly how much fight they would have in them. This is what he's describing. His daughter is getting punched and bludgeoned in the face. None of you, and I'm talking about in any of these chats, including my own, none of you would be able to fight that person off if you're a female. If you're a male, possibly, but you'd still be bludgeoned in the face. Think about 5'3" female, and she wakes up and there's an individual on top of her just bludgeoning her in the face. Have you ever been punched in the face where you see stars and you can't focus? And after a while, you get punched in the face enough, your eyes swell up, you can't see at all. Your lip busted, your nose is busted, you can't breathe. But these people were supposed to save the other person, or they were supposed to save themselves from this individual. Does that really make sense? Or you get ambushed and you get stabbed in the back because you're running from the perpetrator and you're asleep and you don't wake up. The perpetrator jumps on you and slashes you in the neck, starts carving your legs, but you're supposed to jump up out of your sleep, barely gasping for air, and defend your girlfriend as she's trying to defend you while she's struggling to live. How much sense does that really make? It doesn't. So to say that these individuals that were murdered could have defended themselves, it's not a movie. It's not a movie. Let me punch you in the face as hard as I can, repeatedly, out of the blue, and see how you defend yourself. You're not going to be able to. Hell, all I got to do is hit you in the throat and you can't breathe, and you're gasping for air because your windpipe crushed. So you're telling me that you're going to be able to overtake this attacker? It's not plausible.
This is important information. Chris McDonough, when you talk about what that scene was like, it seems clear that investigators are able to figure out who died first and who had. And when they talked about the defensive wounds, it seems like it's coming from Kaylee because she wakes up, she is fighting, and then the killer strikes her as
Yeah, Vinny, and you can recreate the sequence based on obviously the cast off from the knife, unfortunately, and the positioning of the bodies, as well as what you're talking about, the defensive wounds there. But let's not also forget that there's somebody else who is still alive at that time, and that is Xana. And so the dad here, God bless him, is talking about these two.
And everybody's saying Xana was still awake. Xana was still alive. Why didn't Xana call 911? Because Xana was trying to live. This was an ambush. This was not they're leisurely in their beds and all of a sudden somebody just gently tried to attack them. This is a very vicious crime, and it was very fast, very calculated, and very bloody. Whether you believe it or not. Whether you believe it or not, whether you believe other people's theories or whatever, that's fine. That's their thought pattern. But to believe that this wasn't as vicious as it was, or the fact that the surviving roommates, let's focus on them because they didn't die. So they were on their phones. What that have to do with the killer killing 4 people? What that have to do with these 4 people being dead? That's the point of reference. 4 people died in that house. 2 people were oblivious to whatever the hell was going on, regardless of what their reasoning for it. That doesn't matter. They're not the killers. So to sit there and focus on them as if they're the killers and to point fingers at what they did every second leading up to the 911 call, that's just deflecting from the vicious murder that happened in this house. And it's easy to do that because you don't have any understanding of how to piece things together like these individuals are talking about. So it's easy to go against other people because it's easy to attack them. Are they going to get online and defend themselves? No, they're not. They're somewhere holed up because of the trauma that they've experienced, that people continue going after them. Why didn't they call 911? The 8-hour gap, the 8-hour gap. Okay. So would you still be as angry if they would have called 911? 911 would have showed up 2 minutes later and everybody still would have been dead. Would people still be as angry? Or would they say, well, why didn't they jump up and go and save their roommates? They cared about their roommates that much. Why didn't these females jump up and go take on a male? You know why? Because they would have met the same demise. This individual was on a mission to harm, kill, and maim. And he succeeded. And that is the point blank notion of everything, is he succeeded. Nobody was able to save these 4. And he must pay the price if he is indeed the guilty one. And that is the end of the thought pattern right there. It is He is the one to have to answer for this because he is in custody.
Young ladies up there, and if this is a sexual fantasy homicide, this guy had his targets, and he was not going to let go, and the brutality shows.
Dr. Robbie Ludwig, I can't imagine the terror for Kaylee. She's with her best friend. She's in a place where she feels safe with her friends, in their home, in bed. She's asleep, and her best friend in the world has just been murdered. It wakes her up, and suddenly she is fighting for her life.
It's unimaginable, right? It's just so hard to imagine. But at some point, she probably knew that she was going to die at some point. And this Brian and this sexual homicide fantasy, that is exactly right. Brian was not able to get the women that he wanted. And so for him, this sexual violence in a bed with these chosen girls and the nightmare and death was for him as close to sex or better than sex than he could get. So it sounds like he was in.
And they weren't smiling like this in the bed. So just because we see these smiles, because we see these pictures of these individuals, these aren't the last images that their families will get to see. Kaylee over there, she had her face bashed in, her nose broken, her liver almost lacerated to the point of non-existence. Maddie, she was stabbed and everything else to the point of non-existence. Ethan, we know that he was carved up in his legs and everything. So when we see these smiling faces, this is what people think of. They see these smiling faces. They think, well, these were the victims. No, these were not the victims. This was not the end result of somebody dying. You know? These were not the end results. So, I'm not trying to convince anybody. I'm really not. Because sometimes you can't go against somebody who's being that direction because they've already got their minds made up and you can't change it no matter what you show them. That's why a lot of times I walk away from people like that because you can't change their mind. They've already got their mindset set on a theory that's unchangeable, and that's fine. But I don't go down those rabbit holes.
For the kill, and he wanted to induce fear, and he certainly did that on the way to these girls' deaths. And it's just so hard to think about, and it's amazing this father is continuing to share a story that I'm sure is just painful. It's really like living a nightmare.
Chris, do you have a working theory on why the killer went upstairs first to that third floor? Because you don't enter on that floor. You have to go up either 2 flights of stairs or 1 flight of stairs. I believe it was 1 because I think he came in on the 2nd level. Do you believe there was a reason why he went up there first? Did he know? Do we think he knew there were 2 young women up there? What are your thoughts?
Vinny, I've thought about that extensively, and what a working theory I've had in my head is that the house was a target, but specifically Madison, because he's seen around that house 23 separate times based on the digital footprint. And for somebody to spend that much time, he knew how many girls were in that house. So I've often contemplated, is he imitating somebody? We won't know that till the trial, but he specifically knew where he was going to start and where he was going to end. And I think Ethan was in the way, and I also believe the other 2 girls who survived were potentially, could have been victims themselves that evening.
And when I think about Kaylee,
and it's sad because if Kaylee would have lived and Dylan would have died, would Kaylee be getting as much heat as Dylan got? or vice versa, any of the others, you could have swapped them out. Would they be getting as much hatred as Dylan got for not calling 911? She's not the only one that was supposed to call 911. Bethany didn't call 911 either. But nobody attacks her. They attack Dylan. Why? Because she was the proximity of the crimes. That's why. I'm not saying it was one of the surviving victims, but I think there was two, whether it be two guys, two girls, one guy, one girl. I think the girl touch. It doesn't have a girl touch. Doesn't have a girl touch. A girl's not going to kill that personal, that close up. Those girls could have overtaken any kind of girl, even Dylan. This isn't a girl touch. This is a guy that did this. And there wasn't more than two people. There was one person.
My understanding is I believe she was the one who had graduated early, had a job set up, had just bought her own car like herself, and was sort of visiting that weekend and had finished school. So I'm wondering if he even expected her to be there.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's almost as if she's in the way. And does that explain behaviorally why she was beaten, as the dad has explained here, almost as a revenge of, you're not supposed to be here. You're ruining my fantasy.
And of course, and that's why he was saying their wounds did not match. It's because his daughter had wounds to her face that were it made her look unrecognizable. A female would not be able to beat up somebody that viciously, And like I said, people can have their own opinions, but it doesn't mean that me going against their opinion makes me think that I know it all or I believe it all. I'm merely just presenting what is Occam's razor, Nothing more, nothing less. The mens rea of this whole crime scene.
And that fighting back may have been the reason that the knife sheath gets jarred loose and ends up underneath one of the victims.
Or do we know that Xana's not moving around the house? We don't know that, but she certainly is awake. She's on social media at 4:12 in the morning. He could have been upstairs already doing his thing. I've wondered about that through this whole thing.
And Dr. Rob, we only have about 15 seconds left here, but your thoughts about Steve Gonsalves when it comes time for this trial. Will it be therapeutic at all for him, or will it be detrimental to hear every single detail?
I can't imagine it not being painful. I'm sure he feels it's his duty as a father and something he needs to do. And if at the end of the day, Brian is found guilty, then justice will be served. I hope that justice is served for all of these victims and their families.
Dr. Robbie Ludwig, Chris McDonough, appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you so much. Up next, what else did Dylan see?
On a cold November morning in Moscow, Idaho, the unthinkable was discovered inside an off-campus home. 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, brutally stabbed to death in their sleep. The savage nature of the killings shocked the small town and the entire nation. The victims, all young and full of promise, were taken in a calculated, silent attack that left few clues behind, except for a knife sheath found near one of the bodies, which would later become key to the investigation. Months of speculation and fear followed before an arrest was made. Now the trial approaches and the world watches with bated breath.
So since we're talking about the psychology of all this, let me jump into the thought process of an individual, okay? I wish I had a dry erase board. This would be easier to show. But we have an activating event. it goes into feelings, what we're feeling about that event, which goes into the thought about our feelings about that event. And then we have the action, and the action is always going to be negative or positive or undecided. So each one of us, as human beings, we all think every second of every day until we die. So, with that being said, these thought processes that we put out there into the world, we have to understand that these thought processes are based on our own life experiences, our own ability to listen to other people and either buy into what they say or don't buy into what they say. So, Brian, activating event could have been the fact that he was no longer going to be a TA, that he was losing his stability as we speak. Um, the feeling about that was irritable, angry, anxious. The thought was, I need to do something to change this, and it needs to be something that gives me almost like a revenge type outcome, and that was the action. Obviously, if he is the one, then that's how it ended up. But it goes along with everything that we do on a daily basis. So that's why whenever people say certain things, you can take that thought process cycle and you can put it in there, and the outcome, whatever it is, you can say, okay, well that leads to more question than it does explanation. There's not an action phase there at the end of their statement. All it is leading to more question. So that means that that's an incomplete thought pattern. That is nothing more than just another variation of speculation or theory in their eyes. So that's why a lot of times when people say what they say, it's easy to decipher that because it leads to more question. Now, if the action was an action based answer, then it makes sense. It makes sense that you would say, well, okay, well, the female entered the house, she was able to overtake um, Kaylee because Kaylee was, or Maddie because she was possibly asleep. But then Kaylee wakes up. How big is this female? You have to ask yourself, how big would this female be? Would she be able to handle the knife while being struggled with a female with the same or almost the same leverage as she has? Would she be able to be strong enough to be plunging this knife into an individual? Would she be strong enough to be bludgeoning her and causing the amount of damage to her face is what her dad was saying. And after the fact, if she was able to overtake those two, would she be able to leave and go down and overtake Xana? And as she's going after Ethan, you think that she would be in that concept enough to be able to overtake him and then get back on Xana and then leave? If that's visible and viable in your eyes, then that makes sense to you. But when I'm thinking of this, there's leading to more questions, more unanswered results, not a definitive, not a definitive action statement. And that's why I say what I say. I don't say it to try to make people look dumb. I don't say it to believe that I know it all, but this is how a little bit of how I base when people are talking to me what direction they're trying to get me to go, whether they're actually believing what they say, if it's an action based, because if it's not action based, then chances are they're not confident in the outcome of what they're stating. And that's fine. I'm not
Prosecutors are
referring,
preparing to unveil a
I'm talking to the whole chat, Leslie. I'm talking to the whole chat because I've always wanted to explain that, but I never have had the chance to. And that's how I base a lot of my own thought pattern based on those things, not based on what the individual is telling me. In my mind, I'm going through that process and thinking, okay, well, does this lead to a definitive statement that lead to a thought and action, or did it lead to more questions? You know?
a complex web of digital footprints, DNA evidence, and behavioral patterns. Meanwhile, the defense is expected to challenge every thread of the case. At the heart of it all are 4 young lives cut short and a community desperate for answers and for justice.
This trial is going to be difficult. It's absolutely going to be brutal for the families and anyone connected to these 4 students. And I think brutal for the student body, their friends, their classmates. It's going to be very detailed in terms of the types of evidence. So there's going to be moments where you're going to take a deep dive into forensics, but there's going to be other moments where it's very human. And it's going to be heartbreaking, and it's going to be extremely emotional. In this case, there were 2 more roommates, 2 more young women who were great friends with these victims, and they survived. But they're also witnesses in this case. They're going to have to testify. They're going to have to talk about what they saw, what they heard, everything that they knew, and have to relive that moment. It's not going to be easy, but it's absolutely important because you need every piece of evidence that you have in a case like this.
Okay, I'm going to quit with that one. I'm going to show y'all that Jeff was kind enough to give me the timestamp on the video that I started this with. And I think this is it. Once again, I'm giving Translucent the credit for this. So let's see what this individual says.
Okay. So you think it's all of those issues that make it look like you're under the influence of drugs? Okay. Molly, how do you spell your first name?
Okay, let me see again where Jeff said that was. 3620.
You have to testify in which murder case? Oh. You have to testify in which murder case? Oh.
Okay, the teleprompter thing didn't come up. She said, and yeah, I saw Brian. So if you want to go look at that, it's on Translucent's page. And hopefully you'll be able to make up your own mind about what you believe or what you feel about it. I just wanted to get on a little bit this morning and discuss this with you guys. I hope y'all have a great day. I'll see you soon. Maestro, cue that music.